But it turned out just being like he had to make love to the typewriter to get his power. And it's just a lot of graphic descriptions of this guy having like really graphic S&M like bondage sex with a typewriter, like the fucking keys like nicking his ball sack and stuff. It's like really it's absolutely
just a lot of
hilarious.
intense frottage.
You'll share man's greatest thrill. And tried and failed.
You're dealing with the creme de la creme.
Hello and welcome to episode 25 of the Scratchcast, the alternative music podcast. I'm Snedds, and as always I'm joined by the one who brings balance to the force, Mr. Grant Patterson.
Hello.
And we are just two Scottish loons who love to talk about music. How have you been, Granny boy?
Yeah, I've been really good, man. Yourself?
Yeah, doing pretty good. Like I was saying to you earlier, I've, like you last time, I've ate a massive meal and now I feel like really fat, like really low energy. So we'll see how we got on. I've had quite a busy month, but one of the things that like stood out to me was I went to see Garth Marenghi, like right at the start of the month. I meant to mention it to you when we were out, like at the Starry gig, but I totally forgot about it, which is quite mental. But it was really good. Like it was like basically a book launch. So this is a book written under the guise of Garth Marenghi. It's called Terrortome, and I think it's like three sort of short stories in one book. And
Okay.
so the sort of live event was basically, it's like a book launch where he read like excerpts from one of the books, and he did a bit of a Q&A session, like obviously all in character. So yeah, it was pretty good. Like the book he was reading from was basically about, it's like a fictional writer who wanted to be like the greatest writer on earth, and he discovered this like haunted typewriter that whoever had control of the typewriter had, was able to type like the most amazing writing or whatever. But it turned out just being like he had to make love to the typewriter to get his power, and it's just a lot of graphic descriptions of this guy having like really graphic S&M like bondage sex with a typewriter, like the fucking keys like nicking his ball sack and stuff. It's like really it's absolutely
Just a lot of
hilarious.
intense frottage.
Really intense. Like it was funny. So that was really good. And then there was a Q&A where he got like a member of the audience up to like ask questions, and I think a couple of the boys who got up were like half cut, so it's like it was good. It was a good night. Like yeah.
How long was the actual gig?
I don't know, maybe an hour, something like that.
Still quite impressive though to stay in character for that whole time, isn't it?
Well, he was still like, I bought a copy of the book and I went and got it signed at the end, and he's obviously like signing books as Garth Marenghi, still in character, so it's like, it's quite funny, quite a weird one. But
Did he greet you with "Hello, traveller"?
no, I can't remember what he said, but I think I said to him, I'll never look at a typewriter in the same way again. And he's like, well, you wouldn't. Like, neither you would, I think was his response. Something like that. But so that was quite good.
Where
yeah.
was that again?
Queen's Hall in Edinburgh, which is, where was it? Somewhere down towards, it's not that far from the Meadows, actually. So that was good. I just wanted to mention that somewhere. I didn't know where to mention it, so I thought I'd just start talking about it with no context. Right. What have we got for you on this month's show? On our gig reviews, we've got Chuun Room's Spring Fling, Stag and Dagger Festival and Starry live at the Old Hairdressers. On the digital corkboard, we are talking music from Jodie Langford, Mist and Wing and Ripcord Records. On our single swap, we're discussing High Ren by singer, songwriter, producer, rapper and multi-instrumentalist Ren, and A Definitive Guide to Easy Living by Brighton indie rock outfit Youth Sector. And last but not least, our album reviews this month are Don't Threaten Me With a Good Time, the debut EP from DIY emo punk's Big Hug, The Great Nothing, the debut album from cosmic alt prog rockers Magna Zero, Galore, the new album from grungy hardcore punks of St. Pierre Snake Invasion, and finally Third Side of the Coin from Edinburgh-based nomadic songwriter Inkfields. So we've got quite a lot to get through, and like the last show, like a lot of really like top quality stuff as well, I think. So I'm really interested to talk about some of these things.
You'll share man's greatest thrill.
They've tried and failed. You're dealing with the crap de la crap.
So will we kick off with the gig reviews then, and I'll just talk a little bit about the Chuun Spring Fling I went to see in Leith, and then maybe you can talk about the Starry gig for a little bit. But so this was at Leith Depot at the bottom of Leith Walk, which is just around the corner from where I live, so it was really handy for me to go to. And it's basically a charity event set up by Tune Room, who are a not-for-profit art collective run by Josh Booker, who's also in the band Bikini Body and Soraya Mamish, and they kind of curated a bunch of cool bands, and they produced a zine for the event as well. But there were 4 acts. I only managed to catch 2 of them, but one of them was a band called Pocket Monica, who are like a weird, like sort of pop kind of psych folk 2-piece from Leith. There was a female vocalist. She had this really like awesome deep and bassy singing style, which is described on their Bandcamp page as a voice as deep and true as the love of the dog for the bone. I think at one point she was actually playing the bass as well, but I'm not sure if I'm remembering that right. And then she was accompanied by a multi-instrumentalist playing the flute, the harmonica, and I think he had a guitar at one point as well. It's a really sort of a weird band, but a really cool band, really interesting. They put on a good show. And then I saw the band No Windows, who are a young Edinburgh band, and I knew they were young, but when I actually kind of rocked up and I was like, I mean, they're in their late teens, so like they're sort of 18 or something, I just felt like really, really old. But like, they were really good actually, and they played some songs from. They've got an EP out called Fish Boy. Made a song called Eggshells from that, which is really good. It's kind of, it's like acoustic pop rock, but there's quite, some of the riffs are quite grungy and quite heavy. So singer is really, really good as well. Yeah, they're definitely worth checking out. So that was the Tune Room Spring Fling at Leith Depot, which was really good. Do you want to start off a little bit about Starry? We both went to that.
Yeah, so we covered Starry a little while ago now. We covered their, I think it was 2021 EP Anatomy. And we kind of saw through, I think it was Facebook, that they were playing the Old Hairdressers in Glasgow, which is down Renfield Lane, I think it is, just off Hope Street. So fairly central, quite a good music venue. Kind of been there before for a few bands. So they were playing alongside Hex Bar and Dancer, and I think they were kind of billed as the headliner for that evening, but I don't know what happened. I think it was all a wee bit kind of haphazard. We kind of turned up at about 7 o'clock, went upstairs, only to find out that I think they were still in the midst of doing their kind of sound check at the time. So went back downstairs, had another couple of pints, and then by the time we got back up, I think they were midway through, I believe it was Hex Bar, because the lineup got switched around. I think we kind of later found out it was so that Starry were able to get home back up to Aberdeen in enough time. So I think the order that they actually played was Hex Bar, Starry, and then Dancer last.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Starry played most of Anatomy, and a few songs that I was less familiar with, but they were an incredibly tight band. I think when we were reviewing the EP Anatomy itself, we both kind of mentioned how good the drums were, and that's something that certainly kind of stood out from their live performance. But each of the musicians were kind of top notch, and yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, they were really good. I can't remember what song it was that they played, but I remember after it finished, just turning to you and being like, that totally put me into a trance. I was like,
Totally.
like I can't remember what song it was, but yeah, they were absolutely brilliant live. And I don't remember. I don't know if we only saw like one song of Hex Bar, something like that.
One or two, not much.
Yeah, but I remember the drummer had like a he had like a Black Lives Matter t-shirt on, but it was the same like colour scheme and logo as Black Sabbath's Master of Reality album cover, like the purple and black. So that was pretty cool. I liked his t-shirt, and Dancer were really good as well. I remember the singer in particular being really good from Dancer, and I bought a copy of their EP, which I can't remember the name of, but I bought their EP on cassette tape, and sounds good. Sounds really good on cassette. So I enjoyed that. By the end of that gig, I was absolutely fucked.
Yeah, there was a lot of pints drank in quite a short period of time.
Yeah, I think I had about 7 pints, which is like, I'm not used to drinking 7 pints, and I was like, on the train home, I just had my head up against the seat in front of me, just sort of trying not to move.
Well, I had to leave my last pint because I can't remember what you were talking to me about, but I had to cut you short because I was like, that's great, Snedds, but I really need I need to go. Like, I need to catch my last train because the last train back to Kilmarnock's really early. It's only like 11:15.
Well, I think I was halfway through my 7th pint, so whatever I was talking to you about was probably just like a heap of absolute garbled nonsense. So it doesn't really matter. But yeah, that was a good gig. We went there with our mutual friend McInnes as well, so it was good to see him. So yeah, that was Starry, Hex Bar and Dancer at the Old Hairdressers in Glasgow. I also went to see, and this was just on Saturday past, I went to the Stag and Dagger festival in Edinburgh, it's a 2-day festival. There's 1 day in Edinburgh, 1 day in Glasgow, so this year Edinburgh was on the Saturday, Glasgow was on the Sunday, and yeah, it's quite a cool sort of multi-venue festival, and Edinburgh takes place in the Cowgate across several of the venues down there, so it's, you know, most of the day from like about 2 o'clock into the fairly late at night. So I just went down for a few hours, and the first band that I saw was actually No Windows again. So that's the band I saw at Leith Depot, and I just was interested to see them again. This was in the Mash House this time. They had a few technical difficulties. The sound wasn't that great, and I think part of that's to do the guitarist's effects pedals were like mounted on a cardboard box. So I think he was having issues with that, and I think he broke a string like partway through the set as well. But so they had a bit of a shit time with it, but you could kind of even with that, you still tell they've got like really good songs. But the Leith Depot gig was much better. But it was good to see them again. The next one I saw was a band called Sad Boys Club over at Legends, which is a band I've never heard of. I just kind of took a chance on them to fill in time between one of the other bands I went to see. So I went to see them, and they were a kind of like a sort of emo kind of indie band.
Okay.
There was bits that sounded kind of like the softer side of Coheed and Cambria. There were bits that sounded like a little bit like My Chemical Romance. There was bits of like Block Party in some of the guitars. At one point they did like a full-on 80s synth ballad where the singer like absolutely went for it. There was a sort of 80s guitar solo in there as well. I didn't always love the singer's vocals, but he was clearly like from that song in particular, he was clearly a really good singer, and he was like really lively on the stage. the rest of the band were really lively. The bassist looked like he was from should have been in like a new metal band, like baggy t-shirt, baggy shorts kind of thing. So they were pretty good. I quite enjoyed them. I'd probably see them again. Worth checking out. I also saw a band called Dutch Criminal Record, who you might kind of think, oh, they'll be like a reggae band or something, but they're actually kind of a sort of lively, poppy indie rock band. They were from Brighton. Bits of the Smiths, bits of the Menzingers. Sometimes sound a bit like the Libertines. Like if the Libertines had been like a really tight band instead of kind of a bit ramshackle. And I think overall they were one of the like best sounding bands. Like the sound setup was like spot on. So they were pretty good. I was back in the Mash House as well, so they sounded really good. I've got 4 more that I went to. I'll just fire through them. I went to see Scalping, who are like an electronic, like quite a heavy electronic band, like thumping bass, drums, electronics. They had this was in the Caves, so they had like this really weird sort of sci-fi visuals projected on the wall. There's like melting bodies that kind of looked like they were made of liquid, and there was like weird planetscapes and these geometric shapes, and all as the backdrop to this really sort of pounding electronic. The visuals were a bit like some of the stuff that Code Orange had done for their Underneath album, like some of that weird kind of almost sort of liquid metal kind of human body kind of things. That was quite weird. But yeah, the actual music was kind of like, it's like a mixture of like Faithless and Underworld and Kerncraft 400, and then like a bit of like the odd like Rammstein riffs thrown in as well. So it was quite heavy, really really intense as well. The Caves has got a small like enclosed venue, so it was like, yeah, it was very very intense. But I was actually quite. Sorry to
interrupt, Snedds. See the Caves, is that Blair Street Vaults? No. Is it round about that area, kind of Banshees Labyrinth and...
Yeah, so...
Nidri Street, no?
So Nidri Street, if you come down Nidri Street and cross over the Cowgate straight over, the Caves is on that street, whatever you call that, whether it's still Nidri Street or what it is.
Yeah. That's a wedding venue as well, I believe.
It is a wedding venue. They put on loads of gigs. I saw Jamie Lenman there and a band called Ithaca, who were like a super heavy metal band as well. So they do lots of quite cool gigs, as well as putting on weddings, and I think like they do work dues and all that kind of stuff as well. So really cool venue, because it's just like, yeah, it's basically an underground vault, like you say. Really cool venue. So I went from there to La Belle Angel, which is just a bit further up the Cowgate, just down from the Mash House. And I went to see Alice Glass, who was formerly a member of Crystal Castles. So I haven't followed a lot of Alice Glass's solo stuff, but I was super into Crystal Castles back in the day. And yeah, she came on stage and she just absolutely blew me away. Really intense electronic music, with these sort of poppy, almost grating at times, modulated vocals. And if you're familiar with Crystal Castles, then you know the script. But so there are similarities with stuff we've covered before, like Black Dresses, that really heavy kind of electronic style. There's another artist out there called Poppy who does similar stuff, but with more like new metal and other metal sort of songs and stuff. So really really cool music. Alice's aesthetic was very gothic. She was almost, it's almost like she had corpse makeup, but she's kind of had like pigtails, like a bit like Harley Quinn or something like that.
Yeah,
that kind of aesthetic.
I saw her on the cover of a magazine not all that long ago, and that was the get up. It was kind of ponytails, mini dress, boob tube type thing.
But it's
quite
also quite like her makeup was very much like dead kind of face kind of idea, and that was reflected in the crowd because there were people who were dressed like Marilyn Manson. There was a guy who had like a full mask on his head. It was almost like a clown mask, but also like a skull mask, maybe like
a two-headed mask type
no
thing?
it was a mask, but it sort of looked a bit like a clown, but almost like it was made of human skin, or like it was sewn up and stuff. It was really, really weird, but it was like, it's like a member of Slipknot had shown up or something. It was pretty cool, like a cool crowd, interesting crowd. And like I said, I don't really know Alice Glass's songs, but yeah, she just blew me away. And she played 3 Crystal Castle songs as well, which was just kind of the icing on the cake. And then I came away with this T-shirt. I don't know if you can see it.
Nice, man.
But,
I did notice that.
I picked that up on the way out, so that was kind of how much I enjoyed it. I was like, fuck it, I'm going to buy this T-shirt. So Alice Glass was excellent. Right. There's a lot of stuff here. Right? Two more. So there was a band called Redolent, who I'd never heard of before. A colleague at work recommended them, and they're an Edinburgh-based experimental 5-piece. It was a bit of a palate cleanser after Alice Glass. It was still kind of electronic stuff, but nowhere near as heavy or abrasive. It reminded me a bit of Jamie T in places. There were bits that reminded me a lot of bands like Alt J. Occasionally the vocals sounded a bit like the Police. There was a song, or a part of a song, that reminded me of the song Steal My Sunshine.
Yeah.
Like there was some of that in there. Just a really interesting band, and they had like their song lyrics on like one of these LCD screens, like ticking like along behind them, so you could sort of see the lyrics. And yeah, they're a Scottish band. They've got a song called Dinna Greet, which I thought was a nice touch. And good band, worth checking out. They've got an EP called Make Big Money Fast Online Now, which came out in January, so it's worth checking out. And then the last band I saw, I went to see Youth Sector at Bannerman's Bar. So we're obviously going to talk about Youth Sector a little bit later on with their single, whatever it's called.
A definitive guide to easy living.
Definitive guide to easy living. Thank you. And I didn't.
They're great.
Yeah, they were fucking brilliant. Like I was absolutely like I think Alice Glass is my favourite act of the night, but Youth Sector were a close second. Like they were just brilliant. Like a sort of funky indie rock band, and they got like elements of Talking Heads and like there's bits that sounded like Burning Down the House. They sound a bit like Huey Lewis and the News at times. There's a bit of Jet in there. They had a bit of Jet, maybe Franz Ferdinand. And there's a band called Dogs Die in Hot Cars. I don't know if you remember them. They had a really good album in 2004 called Please Describe Yourself. And I hear a lot of Dogs Die in Hot Cars in some of Youth Sector's music as well. But yeah, they were really impressive.
Yeah, I was quite gutted when you told me you went to see them. I was at a 5th birthday party with Imogen doing fucking Agadoo or the conga or something. How would you describe their setup, by the way, or their get-up? Because it's almost like bar mitzvah, prom band, American prom band type get-up, isn't it?
Is that like sort of, I don't know if it's 60s or 70s, the wide collars.
Yeah.
They all had orange shirts on. They all looked really cool as well. They all had the same they all wore the same get up, but they all had their own
Yeah.
kind of style at the same time, which was cool. And they came on to, I think it was Night Fever. They played, like they just put on the start of Night Fever and they walked onto the stage to that. So it's like, oh, we're going into this disco kind of funky kind of, yeah, it kind of set it up quite well.
Absolutely.
Really tight band. I've wrote they were as tight as a gnat's chuff.
They blew me away. I was quite disappointed. I think I said to you before. I would have said to you before. Like I first saw them when they were when they were supporting Darwin Deeds at St Luke's? Yeah, I think it was St Luke's. And unfortunately, they didn't have any merch really on sale other than kind of like tote bags and stuff. I was kind of hoping to pick up one of their EPs, but unfortunately, didn't have any of that at the time. But yeah, I'd love to go and see them again.
Yeah, they were good, and they did. I don't know what song it was, but in the middle of the song, they sort of stopped, and then the boy was like to the back of the room, like shout yeah, and then. So everyone at the back of the room shouted yeah, and he was like, everyone at the front of the room shout yeah, and then everyone at the front of the room shouted there, and he pointed right at me, and he's like, told me to shout yeah, and I was like, yeah. It was good fun. But it was such a small, like Bannerman's a really small, it's just a bar with a stage at one end, so I was right at the front the whole time, like I was just like right in the middle. So yeah, really good. And I remember them they played a song called Number One Bestseller, which is an absolute banger. But the bass, I think it was the bass, but it really reminded me of an obscure Scooby-Doo cartoon theme tune. There's a like spin-off of Scooby-Doo called Scooby-Doo Scary Scooby Funnies or some shit. I think it was called something different in this country, but I couldn't find out what it was. But that's what it was called in America, and it's like reruns of Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo like shorts, and the theme tune for that has got this funky bass line and like totally different to all the other like spooky kind of Scooby-Doo soundtracks. For some reason this had like a disco funk soundtrack, and it sounds exactly like Youth Sector. So it's like
the bassist looks like he has so much fun on stage as well. It's the guy with the big massive tash.
Yeah, I thought he looked a bit like Nick Cage or something like that as well.
Yeah.
Like a tash, but yeah, they were excellent. I think they've got a song called The Ball as well, which is an absolute banger, and it's like really really fun band. So I really recommend that. Even if you haven't heard their music, just go and see them, because they're like just a really convincing, energetic rock band. Well worth seeing. So that was Stag and Dagger. It was really good. It's always worth putting your name down for the mailing list for Stag and Dagger, because they'll send you an email when the early bird tickets get released, and it's like, if you buy them on the day of release, it's like 15 quid for like an entire day of music. So, you know, I saw like six bands in like 4 hours, but if you went the entire day, you know, you could see 10 or more bands for like £15. So it's an absolute, it's like just a crazy bargain.
You'll share man's greatest thrill.
They tried and failed. They tried and died. You're dealing with the crap de la crap.
So anyway, let's move on to the digital corkboard then. So this is where we throw in just anything else we think is worth you knowing about. It could be new singles, albums from bands we've already covered, new bands, films, or anything else we think is interesting really. So what I'll do, I've spoken for ages about Stag and Dagger, so do you want to say a little bit about Mist and Wing?
Yeah, so Mist and Wing was a band that was recommended to me through our mutual friend Colin. He himself has a band that's worth checking out as well, called Hometown Harbours. So I think Mist and Wing are a couple of his pals. They're a Scottish duo. It's a man and a woman. Unfortunately, I don't have their names at my fingertips. I believe one's from up north, kind of like, West Coast kind of way, and the other's from Glasgow. I think they kind of met down in Glasgow, and they play kind of mix of kind of trad Scottish music, kind of trad Scottish indie music with a kind of hint of Americana. And we were recommended their EP called Step Into the Light, which was released just on the 18th of November last year. Took me a wee while to get into, to be honest, but it definitely grew on me, and I think it's definitely worth kind of checking out. Interestingly, at the very end, because I think the last song, which I won't be able to pronounce, I'm not even going to try, it's a purely instrumental piece, and I remember thinking, like, this is kind of like hyped, quintessential Scot trad music, and I was listening to it on Spotify, and it was immediately followed up by fucking Jimmy Shand. Like, Jimmy Shand's music just came on after, so like, yeah, that's pretty good.
Like, it's much more contemporary sounding than Jimmy Shand.
Yeah, Jimmy Shand, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's worthwhile saying as well that I Will Go is probably, I think that's the third, I think it's the second or third track on the album, or the EP. It's a fantastic song. Kind of almost reminiscent of, Wild Mountain Time by the Corries, but again with a kind of contemporary twist, like you said. But yeah, I absolutely loved that.
Yeah, I think this is it's a pretty good EP. When I first pressed play on like the first track, and the boys' vocals come in straight away, I was sort of cringed a little bit. I was like, oh, I don't know if I like this. And then it kind of just, after a while, kind of grew on me. And then you get this sort of male and female vocal harmonies that come in, and they're just beautiful. So it's like that initial kind of like, I'm not sure about this. Really kind of, there was like a switch flicked at a certain point where I was like, yeah, I actually really do like this. So yeah, I think Dance Tonight's really good. It's really upbeat and catchy. Country Miles a little bit more country, still pretty good. I Will Go, like you mentioned, good track. It's maybe a bit long at 7 minutes, but it's quite good. And then I think the last one's just sort of, like you say, very traditional sounding instrumental, but I quite enjoyed it as well, so worth a look. So it's Mist and Wing, their Step Into the Light EP. So something I wanted to mention is the artist Jodie Langford, and Jodie Langford is someone I came across back in the summer of 2021, and she came out with the song I Miss It, which is basically when people still couldn't go to nights out in pubs and clubs and go see live music or anything like that, and that's basically what it's about, missing nights out. And it's spoken word with kind of a pounding electronic club mix in the background, and the lyrics are really well observed. There's lines like, I miss the ear ringing, croaky throat, 6 stains in my new coat, cold chips, colder tits, forgetting what tomorrow is, I miss it. And it's just along that lines, really kind of well observed lyrics with this kind of banging electronic club mix in the background. So that was how I came across Jodie Langford, and when I heard she had a new EP out under the name of Chaos of Time, I just wanted to find somewhere to mention her in the episode. And the EP's similar kind of aesthetic to I Miss It. It's it's spoken word, electronic dance music. You've got elements of electronic dance music like Crystal Castles, Pendulum, Infected Mushroom, Bomb Funk MCs. There's a song Take Your Money on there that particularly stands out to me. It's quite moody, sort of slow build banger, and it's like, reminds me a bit of stuff like Dan Lassac versus Scroobius Pip. There's a particular song they did called You Will See Me, which is really dark and sort of a slow burn that just gets more intense as it goes along. So Joe, if if you like the sound of that and you're a fan of Dan the Sack versus Scroobius Pip or The Streets or Jamie T or any of those kind of electronic acts that I mentioned, then definitely check out Jodie Langford.
Sounds quite good.
Yeah. And then last of all, just wanted to mention Ripcord Records, who we've mentioned a few times on the podcast. We were talking about Starry just there. I think they released the Anatomy EP on CD, and they also sent us La Bestia de Gévaudan, their Kintsukuroi album, and I think they released that on cassette tape. So a couple of really good albums that we covered that they've sent us. I think maybe on the same episode, not sure, but I mentioned one of their charity compilations that they did. It was called Refuge, and it was a two-parter with loads of kind of like post-rock, math rock, post-metal, black metal, sludge, all that kind of stuff. And it was in aid of the charity, the domestic abuse charity Refuge. So they've got another compilation out. This is called You Matter Part 2. I obviously missed out on the Part 1 when that came out, but Part 2 is in aid of the suicide prevention charity Papyrus, and it's absolutely massive. There's 101 bands, it's 11 hours of music, and it's from 22 different countries and across 4 different continents. And it's again, it's all like post-rock, post-metal, black metal, sludge, screamo, just heavy music. So if that sounds like it's up your street, you can go over to Bandcamp and pick up You Matter Part 2. It's a Name Your Price album as well, so you know, if you don't have much money, you can still buy it, but it is for charity, so for that mental health charity Papyrus. So definitely worth checking out, and I think, you know, Ripcord Records are a really cool label and do a lot of cool stuff like this, so they're definitely worth following what they're up to next.
You'll share man's greatest thrill.
They tried and failed.
They tried and died.
You're dealing with the crap de la crap.
Okay, so on to the single swap then. And as always, on every episode, we each give the other a song to listen to for discussion on the next podcast. On the last episode, I gave Grant the song Hi Ren by singer, songwriter, producer, rapper and multi-instrumentalist Ren, and Grant gave me a definitive guide to easy living by Brighton art rock outfit Youth Sector. Don't know if I would call them art rock, I don't know why I've put that, but whatever. So Grant, do you want to start with Ren then?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Snedds just quite rightly said there, he gave me Hi Ren by Ren. He also recommended that I watch the video as well, so I did. So this single was released on the 15th of December last year. It's a bit of a long one, just under 9 minutes long. As Ned said, Ren, real name Ren Erin Gill, is a Welsh musician, singer-songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, rapper, poet, producer. He was also formerly part of the indie hip-hop band Trick the Fox and The Big Push. It's worthwhile kind of delving into the video itself, because I believe it's kind of went viral, to be honest, in the last few months, and quite rightly so. It's pretty phenomenal, to be fair. I mean, it's a performance piece of sorts. You could imagine that up on stage. I was saying to Kerry, in terms of the video, the lyrics and everything, you could imagine that being critiqued within kind of like English classes or at university for years to come. But just to tell you guys a little bit more about it, for those who haven't seen it already, the video opens with Ren wearing a standard issue hospital gown, holding a guitar. He's kind of wheeled into this dilapidated room with, you know, the paint's kind of peeling off the walls, and it's, you know, pretty horrible looking. So he's wheeled into this room by in a wheelchair by a nurse wearing a kind of pig mask, which I don't think's kind of really explored any further within the video itself. But he's then kind of left and kind of placed in between two lamps. So there's one kind of larger freestanding lamp to the, I suppose it would be the right of him, but as you're watching it, it's to the left of him, and a smaller lamp which is kind of sat on top of an antique looking kind of table, which is set a wee bit further back into the room. The song itself opens with Ren playing a kind of classic flamenco style guitar riff. Then at around the 1 minute mark he starts almost howling, which I think some listeners might find a bit jarring and maybe a bit off-putting. And to be fair, you know, on my first listen I was a wee bit like, what's this about? But the payoff really comes when he starts singing. He kind of sings. At first, in the video, he's kind of facing the smaller lamp and kind of delivering a soliloquy to that, and then turns to face the larger freestanding lamp and delivering another soliloquy to it. And it's a kind of back and forth. And initially, he's kind of talking about kind of moving on and feeling as if he's in a kind of better place, kind of talking about how his music has been a source of healing and recovery and been a kind of positive influence for him. And as the song progresses and the video progresses, you quite quickly realise that there's this kind of fight between good and evil, the kind of light or dark side of his kind of personality or his mental health. And when the light side of Ren seems to be winning, as it were, the dark side that's how I'm going to describe it, I think. Just kind of hits back with this pretty amazing. I've actually written down the lyric here, but I think you really need to kind of see it yourself or listen to it yourself to get the kind of full impact of it. But it's pretty amazing. It kind of gave off some proper kind of sympathy for the devil, Exorcist vibes. You know, this dark side kind of talks about being created at the dawn of temptation. He's the snake Canadian. He is the reason for treason, beheading all kings. I'm sin with no rhyme, no reason, son of the morning, Lucifer. It goes on, and it's a pretty epic moment. And all the while, this small lamp, that one that's kind of set that wee bit further back into the room, is just kind of blinking on and off in kind of more frenzied fashion as kind of time goes on. But then, you know, there's this really uplifting moment in the song where Ren kind of takes control. He kind of counters this with his own argument and this kind of rousing sentiment that he will kind of overcome the forces of evil, as it were. He kind of stands up rather than sitting in the wheelchair, because obviously, like, I suppose if you're talking about, I don't know, symbolism, wheelchair is, you know, to use a wheelchair as a kind of symbol for disability and illness, as it were. And he kind of stands up and takes charge and is taking control. And there's one lyric in that bit in the song that I really quite liked, about he's, you know, going to inspire the meek to be strong and kind of take control. And then there's this kind of return to that kind of howling at the beginning, or that we kind of heard at the beginning, before Ren then delivers this other soliloquy, this time kind of facing the camera and addressing the listener directly, talking about his own struggles with autoimmunity, illness and psychosis. And if you do a bit of reading on Ren, all that's quite well documented. He's a big advocate for mental health and for people who struggle with autoimmunity diseases. He, I think, was initially diagnosed with, I want to say, bipolar affective disorder and psychosis, and possibly even chronic fatigue syndrome in his early 20s. And then it wasn't until he went over to Brussels that he found out that he actually had Lyme disease, and that was kind of the source of all these problems. And that's something that he continues to kind of struggle with today. The lyrics are really poignant. That soliloquy at the end is really poignant, really emotive. Having worked, I do work in mental health. For me in particular, that lyric that says that there are no real winners or losers in psychological warfare, but there were victims and students. And this idea that kind of, you know, it's not a case of people winning, losing, or recovering or failing, or whatever. It kind of exists in this kind of pendulum, and there's this kind of eternal dance that they're all doing. he talks about it, kind of what separates us from angels and demons. It makes us all human, and that's something that we should never forget, because, you know, in the middle of all these kind of struggles, there's somebody at the very bottom of it, and that should be appreciated and nurtured, I suppose.
I think it's in that kind of spoken word bit in the sort of last minute of the song. I think he talks about this sort of swing, the back and forth swing of the pendulum, and there's a lot of that in the song. The bit where it's kind of the light and the dark kind of battling back and forth, as you were. There's that swing, and there's the two characters. There's him, and then there's the dark side, and each of those characters, a different type, like, guitar line is played, and it jumps back and forth between sort of Ren, sort of normal speak singing, almost a bit like Jamie T, and then it jumps back to this more grotesque dark character that sounds like, you know, something out of The League of Gentlemen, or like, you know, like the song Stan, when Stan becomes even more and more like frenzied towards the end of that song. There's that kind of vibe there, and yeah, I think the kind of that sort of hooting falsetto, I don't know how exactly to describe that he does right at the start of the song, feels quite like tortured. I think it's like you said, I think that'll put some people off right at the start, and it did put me off a little bit when I first heard it, but I think it works really well, and it feels quite like pained in the way it's delivered. And like you say, it's performance art. I think it's the same thing we were talking about with the opening track on that Muddy album. You can see it, you know, you can see it as it's not just a musical
piece of theatre.
It's a whole, it's a piece of theatre, and really, really impressive. Some of the lines on it, and it's really funny as well. Like, there's a bit where he's talking about being really, really hopeful about his music and thinking, you know, he could really do things. And then the dark part of him comes back, and he's like telling him he's full of shit, like, where's your top 10 hit, where's your interview with Oprah, like talking about just being a kind of Plan B or an Eminem copycat. And it's really harsh put downs, but there's a lot of humour in there.
And ridiculing these songs and reducing them to the likes of I can't say it, but she sells seashells down by the seashore, like just silly little rhymes.
Yeah, and I think it. I haven't really listened to the song without the video, to be honest. I think the video it's just like a complete package for me.
Yeah, I actually listened to the song first without the video. Yeah, and he wasn't what I expected. I don't know what I expected to see, you know, when I went to watch the video. But yeah, I think you're right. I think they do come as a complete package. And he's released a couple of I think he's released a few singles since then. And again, I think there's a similar amount of kind of thought went into the videos that accompany them as well. Yeah,
I think there's the whole thing with the hospital gown and stuff like that is a theme through some of those videos as well, because I don't remember the song name, but I'm sure there's one where he's like sat at a table almost being interrogated, and he's wearing this hospital gown.
Yeah, because I think it's Sick Boy, and Illest of Our Time. I think Illest of Our Time is the latest one.
Yeah, there's an older song called, I think it's older. It's called The Tale of Jenny and Screech, and it's again quite theatrical. It's just him with an acoustic guitar. This time he's just like playing it in an alleyway, and it's a sort of storyteller with the acoustic guitar kind of style thing. Really, really cool. What did you give this in?
Has to be a 10 out of 10, man.
Yeah,
has to be.
I was hoping you would say that, because that's what I've given it as well. Yeah, there's not much more that we can say about it. It's just kind of a genius piece of performance, music, storytelling. You know, really engrossing, dark, funny, uplifting, just brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Well, okay. Well, that goes into the Hall of Fame. Still don't have any kind of buzzer or fireworks, or even like
the
a
balloons with the dead
little,
clown.
a little dinger, like a wee bell to ding or something. Don't need any cheap gimmicks here.
Nah, I actually got one of those little bells from somebody for my 30th. No idea why. No idea why.
When you turn 30, you must like senior citizen, so everyone's going to be running after you like, when you ding your bell.
And when I'm gone, maybe I'll be remembered for doing something special with myself. That's why I don't think that we should talk, man. Cause when you're with me, it never seems to help. I'm not leftover dinner, I'm not scraps on the side. Oh, your music is thriving, delusional guy. Where's your top 10 hit? Where's your interview with Oprah? Fuck you, I don't need you, I don't need to hear this. Cause I'm fine by myself, I'm a genius. Son of the morning, Lucifer, Antichrist, father of lies. Mephistophelies, truth in a blender, deceitful pretender. So coward the man I've become when I sing from the top of my lungs. That I won't retire, I'll stand in your fire, inspire that me to be strong. When I was 17 years old, I shouted out into an empty room, into a blank canvas, that I would defeat the forces of evil.
Okay, right. Let's move on to Youth Sector and A Definitive Guide to Easy Living then. So this is a single that you gave me from Youth Sector, who I've already talked about fairly extensively from seeing them at Stag and Dagger. So Youth Sector are a Brighton-based indie rock band. They've got a bit of a 60s, 70s vibe to their style. We talked about they all dress up in suits with big collars. There's funk, there's disco, there's swagger and polish to their music. So this was actually the song they opened with at Stag and Dagger, and I was just, absolutely blown away instantly by them. And I think if I wasn't quite sold on the song yet, that performance kind of tipped me over the edge, because it's just an absolute belter of a song. There's, those musical cues that I talked about before. There's kind of Talking Heads-esque vocals. There's a bit of the B-52s in there. The odd bit of Razor Light. Again, I'm going to name drop Dogs Die in Hot Cars, because there's just something about this band that remind me of Dogs Die in Hot Cars. And then Huey Lewis and the News. It's just funky bass lines, spiky guitar lines, splashes of synth. All the vocal moments where other members of the band join in, like the odd shout, a wee bit of falsetto, the kind of full-on, I'm going to call them gang vocals, but it's not quite as rowdy as like gang vocals. It's more like shouty harmonies, I guess. And it's just like quite a joyful, kind of uplifting song. They mix things up roughly at the 2-minute mark. Still pretty funky. There's a bit of a change in stomp to the drums, a different punch to the vocals, and some nice stabbing guitars. But overall, it's just a really cool song, and a really interesting band.
Yeah, I love this song, man. I think they've got a definite, like a definite flair for songwriting, and those funky little hooks, that kind of breakdown. I think it's maybe part of the kind of pre-chorus, where I think you get that gang vocals, like you said, where they think they sing the lyric, it isn't very nice, is such a big hook for me. Like, you just find yourself singing along with it. It's fantastic. And I thought, like, although it's a kind of funky song and quite a cheerful song, for lack of a better word or phrase, I thought it dovetailed quite nicely with Meryl Streep's single from last time, because it is about homelessness, effectively.
Oh, right, okay.
It is about deliberately designing, I suppose, architecture and streets and towns and what have you to look nice, rather than thinking about the people that live within it and the people who are maybe less fortunate and have to kind of live out in the streets. Because it talks about, I think in the opening verse, it kind of talks about making benches and deliberately putting an armrest in the middle so people can't lie down in it. Things like that, spikes under bridges and what have you as well.
I have to say I didn't really latch on to much of that stuff, but then I think it's part of that is just because it's such an immediate song and so catchy and so fun that I'm just like too busy getting kind of caught up in
grooving away to
everything that's going on. Yeah, like I said, there's bits, the stuff that reminded me of Huey Lewis and the News was like specifically like songs like The Power of Love. Like there's just weird bits in there that reminded me of that, and you know, I mentioned Burning Down the House before. There were bits on the song that reminded me of that, so it's just a really interesting, fun song. But yeah, it's cool that there's also that depth to the lyrics and the themes on the song as well.
What did you give it?
So I've given this a 9 out of 10. I think it's excellent, exceptional.
It's a 10 out of 10 for me. I'm handing them out like nobody's business.
Is this the way it's going to be from now on? It's just like
yes, fucking. No, I loved it, man. As I said, I think I said last time, like it was a bit lazy of me, I suppose. I kind of chucked this in last time, basically just because it was an excuse just to talk about them. Because, yeah, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you did, and I think the fact that we were covering this reminded me of who Youth Sector were, and therefore I was like, I'll go and see them at Stag and Dagger, because otherwise I might have just been like, I don't know who they are. I'll go and see someone else. So it was good that I got the chance to see them, because yeah, they're a brilliant live band.
That's why they call me the best of the best architects in the urbanized West. Well, can we read it up? Can we tilt it down? It's ill-advised to try lying in at your fallout. You know you've been in big place before you come into my town. Can't you see it's a pretty room and it must stop? Let there be light, let there be land, let there be concrete. Oh, let there be water and food to eat, let there be concrete.
Okay, so what have you got for me next time?
I have got you. You Can Be Mean by Indigo De Souza. She is an American singer-songwriter. This was released on the 5th of April, so earlier on this month, on Saddle Creek Records. This is the second song from her third album, which was released just last week on the 28th. So yeah, album's really good and worthwhile listening to.
I've heard the odd Indigo De Souza song. I don't think I've listened to the album yet, but yeah, interested to listen to this. So as You Can Be Mean by Indigo De Souza. So I'm going to give you the song Post-Punk Experiment number 3 in brackets A Bigger Splash by self-described purveyors of soupy rock from Glasgow, Scotland. I haven't actually written down what they're called here, but they're called the Wife Guys of Reddit. It's like, I don't know why I haven't written the name down, but
the Wife Guys of Reddit.
They're called the Wife Guys of Reddit, yeah, which is a strange name. I don't know if there's some kind of in-joke there, but I don't get it, whatever it is. But
there's a huge subculture within Reddit, isn't there? It's something that I've never really been au fait with.
No, me neither. So there's maybe some sort of in-joke that we don't understand there. But anyway, so they're a sort of, I've called them a post-indie band, and by that I mean, like, you remember that band Yammerer we covered? It's like it's like post-punk, but it's not punk. It's more indie. I suppose bands like Squid and stuff are a bit like that, aren't they? Like, so yeah, I'd say this is a bit like Yammerer, and there's the main lyric in this song is really funny. And I was going to tell you what it was, but I don't actually want to spoil it. I just want you to, because it
Look
kind
out
of
for it.
ruins the impact of the song, because it's like the first lyric and it's repeated a lot throughout the song. So I don't want to ruin it. I'd rather you just went in cold. It's got a weird video as well. You don't need to watch the video, but the video does is quite interesting. So and involves toilets,
Okay.
and toilet seats, and stuff related to toilets.
Okay.
So anyway, this is just a little bit of a weird song, but it's quite a good song as well, in my opinion. So it's post-punk experiment number 3, A Bigger Splash by the Wife Guys of Reddit.
Oh.
You'll share man's greatest thrill.
They tried and failed.
They tried and died.
You're dealing with the crap de la crap.
Right, on to the album reviews then. So if you're listening and have something you'd like us to hear, you can send it over to us at the Head Scratcher at Outlook. I'll screw that up. At outlook.com, or direct message us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. So the first one we've got for you is Don't Threaten Me With a Good Time. This is the debut EP from London-based three-piece Big Hug. The band are made up of guitarist and vocalist Tom Watkins, bassist and vocalist Henry Langston, and drummer Owen Mumford. Henry from the band kindly sent us the album after seeing Waco on the podcast, and figuring they were roughly in the same wheelhouse, thought we might be interested in their music. So I'm not sure Big Hug sound that much like Waco, but there's definitely that kind of DIY punk rock attitude in their music. Waco are tuned more towards like classic rock and punk, and I think Big Hug channel more of the kind of emo side of that kind of music of the early noughties, late 90s. The band even described themselves as indie post-punk with a touch of 90s emo your older sister would like.
Yeah.
I feel like at this stage we're probably the older sister here in this story. So when I listen to this, I hear kind of some of the more underground stuff I was listening to as a teenager, like stuff like Days in December, Hiding with Girls, Rufio. There's bits of Dan and Anna Aykroyd in there.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then there's stuff like The Used and Rival Schools on the kind of more mainstream end of things. Yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I love this EP. First song, Raise the Bar, the opening bars, just I found them, they were immediately uplifting. It's interesting you mentioned Dan and Aykroyd there, because I love that neat little kind of math rock guitar riff that you hear.
Yeah.
The vocal harmonies are beautiful and an absolute joy to listen to. For me, it kind of reminded me a bit of the Kestrel's album that we covered. Dream, Don't Dream, just ever so slightly less shoegazy, because I wouldn't describe these guys as a shoegaze band by any stretch of the imagination. Second song, Guinness Paltrow, which I thought was just an amazing name for a song. Kind of opens with this kind of spectral, kind of ethereal kind of guitar riff for a few bars before being met with this kind of really meaty kind of choppy bass line, which was just brilliant. The call and answer post-chorus vocal refrain is just fantastic as well. And this is a song I just found myself kind of singing along to. And weirdly, I don't know, like whenever I listen to this song, I'm not 100% sure, obviously I don't know what it's about, you know what I mean? But for some reason, I think it's because it's got like Guinness in the title, I kept having images of this guy like ordering a pint of Guinness and then taking it back. And I don't know why. I think it was just that one lyric, just like, there's always a reason. I think there's always a reason, go ahead and ruin it. It's, like that thing where, there's this, I don't know, mythology around pouring pints of Guinness. You know what I mean? Yeah. It has to be done in a certain way, and having worked in bars before, like, I would get people that I'd pour pints of Guinness and different beers and that for folk, and they'd be like, oh no, that's off, or like there's something a bit wrong with that. So I don't know why, whenever I listen to the song, I've just got images of somebody like constantly going over to the bar, ordering a pint of Guinness. I think again it's that lyrics, just like what was it? I've just said it as well. I know what you came for, I know it's dangerous. knowing fine well that he's just gonna send it back. Who knows, man? I'm just waffling nonsense, but I can't get that image out my head for some reason.
I don't get any of that, to be honest. But
I'd love that to be true, though. I would love that to be true.
Yeah, definitely. I agree that the name of the song is fantastic, and this is one of the songs that reminded me. It's like a bit of a stomp to it that reminded me of the Used, The Taste of Ink. Just not quite as heavy, but it was just kind of a stomp to it that reminded me of that. You know, there's mixtures of poppy vocals, there's grungy vocals, there's catchy hooks, there's drilling guitar lines, bubbling bass, clean guitars. Like, it's just a really good song as well. It's not just a good name, it's also a good song.
Yeah.
And the track after that, Danny is the Greatest Lover, it reminded me of the Manic Street Preachers when it starts up. It's like the opening instrumental reminded me of A Design for Life. It's just similar kind of guitar in the opening, maybe a little bit more ethereal than that song, but and then there's a cool guitar solo in there that reminded me a bit of Turnstile, which is never a bad thing. And I just kept I kept singing along to that Danny is the Greatest Lover part. I found myself just kind of walking through the car park yesterday on the way to my car, like singing that part. I just kind of got stuck in there.
There's flourishes of kind of Sonic Youth in there as well. Like you kind of mentioned that guitar riff, that kind of discordant kind of guitar bridge at around I think it's the 1:22 mark, kind of put me in mind Sonic Youth's Diamond Sea. There's a kind of similar kind of bit in there as well. There's kind of wee twinges of David Santiago as well, but yeah, another belter, another earworm, as you quite rightly said. I found myself singing that line over and over again as well.
Yeah. I think the title track, Don't Threaten Me With a Good Time, has got more of that kind of Dan and Aykroyd, mathy kind of guitar stuff. And there's some really good jagged, distorted guitars that come in. There's just a really good amount of crackle and fuzz on them. I think there's some Menzinger's vibes on the final track, All Yours, mostly in the vocals, especially on the chorus. And it's just super melodic, super nostalgic. I love the kind of anthemic lyrics that go, gone but never really left. I will have another drink for you waiting at the bar. It reminds me a bit of a band like, there's a band called Spielbergs as well, who are just kind of, it's kind of that emo thing, but a bit more shoegazy. But the melody of those lyrics and the delivery of those lyrics reminded me a lot of that band, which is quite cool.
Yeah, I've kind of similarly, All Yours, I've kind of said as well, kind of hits the ground running, as you quite rightly said, upbeat, kind of poppy in places, flourishes of the likes of Plumtree. For me, it felt cinematic. It felt as if it could have been in a soundtrack, perfectly balanced with a bit of kind of melancholia for those 90s early noughties feels is what I've written down here. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, man. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. What did you give it?
What do you think I've given it, Snedds?
I don't know. I'll tell you where I am with it. I gave it an 8.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think it's like a if you're into this kind of thing, it's a must listen EP. It's and a lot of that is kind of how nostalgic it is for me. But it does, like, without sounding dated, it just sounds nostalgic and like modern, which is good.
Yeah, I think I give it a 9. So I think 8 or 9 is a pretty good rating. I would never have thought they were English though. Never have thought they were English.
What would you have thought they were?
I don't know. I thought
American.
Yeah, I would have thought they were American.
Yeah, I might have guessed they were American as well, to be fair. But I mean, you know, I've mentioned stuff like the Used and Rival Schools, and Rufio. They're all American bands, so yeah, fair enough. Okay, so that was Don't Threaten Me With a Good Time, the debut EP from Big Hug. Okay, next up we have got The Great Nothing, the debut album from Cosmic Los Angeles alt-prog rockers Magna Zero. So, if you listen to episode 23 of the podcast, you'll remember we talked about their single Endure, which we were both really positive about and were keen to hear more from the band. I think at the time we talked a little bit about their Almost Go EP as well, which has got 4 of the 11 tracks on here. So, I mean, I've certainly heard a few of these songs before, and so I kind of knew it was likely to be a pretty solid album. So Jason from the band sent us an early stream, so thanks to Jason for that. But the album has been out for just over a month now, so you can go and listen to it right now if you want. It's quite a long album. It's
just under an hour, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like 57 minutes long, which can sometimes be tough to maintain, that sort of a high level of quality and consistency over that time. Do you feel that the band have managed to do that?
I think in terms of musicianship, like, you know, it's top drawer musicianship. There's absolutely no doubt about that whatsoever. Yeah, I did feel as if there was maybe a bit of a dip in energy from maybe about track 5 or 6 onwards. I think I said Oblivion onwards. But that's just my own kind of personal opinion. The first track, All Must Go, I would say the first 4 or 5 tracks are phenomenal. The opening track, All Must Go, is an absolute banger in my opinion. It opens with this kind of reverberating electric guitar which gradually starts to take form. There's a kind of depth, a warmth and clarity to it that immediately caught my attention, and it's kind of swiftly followed by this kind of driving drum beat and a choppy bass line. The vocal refrain of hold steady, hold steady, hold steady, because anything goes. Get ready because all must go. It's just brilliant. I love that. I absolutely love that. It's something you just can't help but sing along to. Just some beautiful kind of soaring guitars at the bridge as well. That's kind of almost transcendental. It just kind of just elevates the song to another level. And I think that dovetailed quite nicely into the second song, Endure, which, you know, as you said, that we kind of covered at the kind of towards the end of last year. What's your thoughts? I'm kind of just delving into these kind of tracks one by one, but I mean, you were asking me there about the kind of composition of the album. Do you feel as if you're in agreement with me, or would you kind of disagree that?
I feel that they've, over 57 minutes, they've done enough to keep it interesting. I would say. I think there's a lot of good songs on here. I'm not sure if I would agree that it kind of dips from Oblivion onwards, because I've picked out Oblivion, Step Into the Light and Eat You Up, which are the tracks 5, 6 and 7, and I've picked those out as like 3 of my favourite songs. So it's you know, it's interesting, but I agree with you that track 1, All Must Go, is an absolute belter, and there's stuff on here that reminds me a bit of like the Fades that we covered last time, like some of the kind of style and instrumentation, some of the funky guitar parts that are in here. I think I mentioned when we talked about Endure that the vocals reminded me of like Perry Farrell from Jane's Addiction, but I hear like stuff that sounds a bit like Bob Dylan in places as well. Like,
Well, I thought Lou Reed. Reed.
Yeah.
But then there was also times where, was it Eat You Up? I think it is Eat You Up. There was times, I think there's maybe just certain inflections in the vocals that reminded me of kind of like Johnny Rotten, like from Public Image Limited rather than the Sex Pistols. They were quite an avant-garde kind of outfit back in the day. Oh, there's one song, I'm trying to remember which one it was, but We Are All, almost for my money, kind of sounded like a kind of stripped back version of Time Zone's World Destruction, which was in an episode of The Sopranos. But it features Johnny Rotten in it, and I think it was that connection again. It was to do with his vocals. There was just something about that, certain inflections it was making. And interestingly, both sentiments are both the sentiment of We Are All and Time Zone's World Destruction are quite similar. I don't know if there is a kind of relation there or not. But yeah, I can get the kind of Bob Dylan reference there as well.
Yeah, it's just that kind of sort of slightly
nasally.
Yeah, but which is quite cool. There's one of the things that stood out to me on this album was the bass.
Bass is phenomenal.
A lot of the bass lines, like the opening track's got a really fat, kind of silky bass tone. I've written down it's one of the best bass tones I've ever heard. Like it's such a good tone. And Endura's got that really driving bass line that drives that song along. The track Oblivion has got one of the hardest bass lines on the album. It's a really electronic fuzz to it. It's even quite doomy. Like, it reminded me of a band called Grave Lines. They're quite a lot heavier, but it was just that kind of sort of doom laden kind of groove that comes in on Oblivion that reminded me of them. Although it sort of jumps between that and then the sort of psychedelic stuff that's all over the rest of the album. And Eat You Up has another it's got a really heavy electronic, but I think the bass is heavy on that as well. And there's parts of that song that reminded me of the Pearl Jam song Go. So it's a bit of sort of grunge, hard rock stuff in there as well. So definitely a lot of cool stuff. Like We Are All you picked out, that's got another great bass line. There's a bit of slap funk to the bass there, a little bit more punky in the guitars. And I think We Are All, Eat You Up, Oblivion, Step Into the Light. In fact, it reminded me a bit of a David Bowie song, like Space Oddity, a little bit of Space Oddity in there. I got a little bit of a T-Rex vibe from that as well.
I think there smacks all that type of classical rock in there, because I've said, Under the Dirt, we've kind of missed that. Like, that's a cracking song as well. It opens with a kind of real bluesy, old school rock guitar riff. The way it's kind of composed and the way it's put together kind of really put me in mind of old Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac song, an old Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac song called Oh Well. But there's a bit of Floyd in there as well, and not in that song necessarily, but there's definitely touches of kind of Floyd throughout the course of the album. It's interesting you mentioned Space Odyssey there as well. Obviously that's a David Bowie song, but the last song, Walking to Nowhere, put me in mind of the song Echoes by Pink Floyd, which is in Stanley Kubrick's Echoes, and just that ending where you hear that kind of like that kind of weird noise just reminded me of that scene from Space Odyssey when he's kind of travelling through time and space.
Oh yeah, that section, that's the section I always remember. That film is like where I was like, I'm out of this film, like I've had enough, because it's like goes on for about 20 minutes, it feels like. We're sitting watching it on like a Sunday afternoon with my granddad or something, and we're sitting watching this bit where he's like, it's just all these psychedelic covers for about 20 minutes just going brrr. And I was like, I can't, I'm done. Like, this is too...
Fuck this, granddad.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. But I really like Walking to Nowhere. Actually, it's one of the longest songs on the album, but it's definitely one of the best, and it's got like a lot of quite straight up hard rock moments in it as well, which I really liked. And there's a bit where it goes almost hardcore punk as well. It's got some of the heavier moments, but then also like some kind of 90s radio rock style melodies as well.
Yeah. What was your what did you rate it?
So I've just gone for a solid 8 out of 10 for this. It's just like, really enjoyable, grungy, psychedelic, hard rock album. And like you were saying, like musically, like the performances from every member of the band are just brilliant across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. I've kind of said similarly. Brilliantly produced, put together, top drawer musicianship, a lot of depth and texture to all the songs. Yeah, my one criticism, and that was just in my opinion, was just that kind of wee dip in energy. However, in my notes I did say that I seem to remember when we were covering Endure, I think the song Endure was about, it was kind of love and loss, dealing with pain, and then finding redemption in love, I want to say. So I wonder, I've said, in terms of the kind of musical composition, it's interesting that they've put Oblivion, which is kind of track number 5, next to Step into the Light, because I thought maybe it's about, like, okay, I'm just waxing lyrical here, but I mean, like, Oblivion, you said, is that kind of moody, Sabbath-esque, kind of fuzzed up, sludgy guitar riff, and then in the next song you've got kind of Step into the Light, which is a much more kind of brighter sounding song. So I wonder if that's maybe deliberate in that respect, and if you were to kind of spend the time to kind of sit down and listen to the lyrics, maybe there is a kind of story there that you could maybe kind of follow throughout. Don't know if that makes any sense.
I mean, I don't know if there's a concept or running theme for the album, but there's definitely socially conscious lyrics, and I think quite a lot to unpack in there. I mean, it is nearly an hour long, so I think there's a lot to unpack. If you dive into it over and over again, you'll keep finding things, and pick out themes that run through these songs and stuff like that. So it's a cool album. So that was The Great Nothing by Magna Zero.
Story. Step into the light with me now. Oh, you run from and suffer to destroy. I wanna eat it up. I wanna eat you up. Statues of greed, worship obsessions, sculpt the truth, capture corrections. So shut down your mind and come with me.
Okay, let's move on to the next album then, which is Galore, the third studio album from Bristol's grungy hardcore punk 5-piece, the St. Pierre Snake Invasion. So this was released on Church Road Records and was sent to us by Sammy Unwin, one of the founders of the label. They're a pretty cool label. They've got lots of awesome heavy bands like Employed to Serve, Harriet, Slow Crush, Going Off, and a whole bunch more. So they're really cool indie label, worth checking out. So the St. Pierre Snake Invasion is made up of vocalist Damien Sale, guitarist Patrick Daly, Jacques Notaro, I don't know if I've pronounced that right, bassist Sanjay Patel, and drummer Pete Reisner. So I knew this band from their debut album 100 Years a Day, which came out in 2015. I don't think I actually heard that when it came out. I think it was a couple of years later, and I think I just saw someone recommending it on a Facebook group. I don't know if it was like the That's Not Metal podcast Facebook group, or whether it was like a Reuben Facebook group or something. That's the kind of things I follow on Facebook, but that's how I became aware of them. The opening track on that album, Thanks But the Answer's No, is an absolute belter, and I listened back to the song When I See a Sycophant Fly the other day, and that's brilliant as well. I didn't love that album, but it kind of got me interested enough to like keep an eye on what the band were up to, kind of thing. So a couple of years later they released their follow-up album Caprice Enchanté, and I kind of followed the release of that album and listened to every single as it came out, and I was just like really excited for it to come out. And when it did finally come out, I was just completely head over heels with it. I wrote a pretty glowing review of it at the time, which you can find on theheadscratcher.com if you want to read that. But it's just a real gem. I described it at the time as harsh and pushy and angry, but also wildly inventive and dripping with grunge, doom and punk goodness, and with a mixture of slacker cool, punk irreverence and cave your face in aggression. So yeah, that record basically blows me away, and it just kind of felt more ambitious, more experimental and more complete than that first album. What's your relationship with St. Pierre Snake Invasion? Have you heard their music before?
I hadn't heard of them before, so I really didn't know what to expect at all, to be perfectly honest with you, man. Yeah, I mean, the first song, Knackered Velvet, the opening bars begin with this kind of staccato spoken word type lyrics, which are kind of coupled with similarly kind of juttering and jarring drums and guitars to boot, which again kind of similar to the kind of Ren song that we were kind of talking about earlier on, I think might initially be off-putting but for somebody who's maybe kind of unfamiliar with their stuff. But yeah, I kind of quite liked it. We were then kind of presented with this kind of quiet, loud type dynamic which continues throughout the course of the song and kind of continues along that kind of pattern, and then the song really hits its stride during these sections with kind of chugging guitar, crashing drums and cymbals, which I just loved. I was just sitting here head banging to it while Kerry was sitting over to the right doing wedding stuff. I was just sitting like that. So yeah, that really kind of caught my attention. Obviously you're more familiar with this band than I am. I mean, does this album live up to your expectations?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, it's been a while since that last album, and I think it probably would have come out sooner had it not been for the pandemic or whatever. But yeah, I didn't really know what to expect, other than it would probably push that experimental side even further, and I think it does that. I don't know if I still think I like Caprice Enchanté better than I do this album, but this is still a really strong album. The first 2 or 3 tracks really great. I mean, Cracked Velvet, it reminded me a bit of a Nine Inch Nails song to begin with, that kind of Trent Reznor style vocal, and then it goes into this like swarm of kind of grunge vocals and riffs. There's quite a lot of Nirvana in there. It's a really exciting opening song that kind of felt quite spontaneous, but at the same time without feeling too kind of disjointed or all over the place. So that's a really strong opener. The next track, Midas, had a kind of similar kick to it, but with a slightly more industrial feel to the drums actually, which worked well with those buzzing electronics. There's a bit of organ in there, some moody piano, nice little percussive touches here and there, like sort of chime noises, and like a wooden block kind of sound that reminded me of being in like sort of standard grade music class. Like you had like a wooden block and a thing to hit it. And it's like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it was just a block of wood with a hammer you hit it with, and that was a thing. I don't know what you call it. The wooden block, I guess. But that's what it reminded me of anyway. It might have been a little more sophisticated, but it just reminded me of that. And actually, that song, there were elements of it that reminded me of a band that I was into as a teenager called Vast, and I think they're a sort of 80s band, but 80s kind of late 80s moving into like 90s. It's kind of a mixture of electronics and sort of moody, soaring vocals that I think I'm getting from that. Like, yeah, that second track is really, really good. And then it's followed by Submeccano, which has got this just absolutely demented, like, spiky lead guitar line, and it just goes so hard, especially when the rest of the band kick in.
Yeah, so I think Submeccano was the first single from the album, one of the first
Yeah, I
singles
think
from
it
the album.
was, yeah.
That was released in February, 17th of February. And you're right, like the guitars are all over the place. I've kind of written here in my notes, it opens with this kind of unwieldy guitar. It kind of put me in fact, I've written here, it kind of put me in mind of the guitar player in the latest Mad Max movie. Remember that guy who's just kind of bungee jumping? Yeah, that's what it reminded me of. Or this kind of almost this mechanical kind of juggernaut just kind of malfunctioning, seizing up and kind of juttering out and spewing out in all sorts of different directions. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. Like,
yeah,
Galore, that's the next track, I believe. So the album's namesake, initially a bit more somber and refrained. However, there's kind of the odd kind of guitar flourish that kind of hints at kind of what is to come later on in the song. I'm a big fan of kind of male and female vocals coupled together. See a kind of an introduction of that there. So I thought they worked really well. And I quite enjoyed that.
Yeah, there's a really good like thrashy kind of beat down section in the last 30 seconds of that song as well. It just goes hell for leather basically. But yeah, the male female vocals on that song, and I think they do it again later on. I'm not sure which song it is that those female vocals come back on, but it's really good when it happens.
Yeah, is it maybe on Apex Prey? Possibly?
Yes, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
That was my favourite track in the album. I came across a really good article by a guy called Dan Hillier from Noise. So he did an interview with the lead singer, Damien Sewell, where they went through the track. We went through the album track by track, which is quite interesting, definitely worthwhile reading. That lyric, "You count your blessings, you count the days," I thought was absolutely brilliant, and he kind of talks a wee bit more about it in the interview itself. And he said that lyric was originally wrote that lyric in his teens, originally written about his father who worked abroad and how he used to count the days for his return. However, once he was in his 30s, the lyric kind of took on a bit of a new meaning, and it represented envy he had towards people who were living a life that he felt he longed for. However, in the song Apex Prey itself, it relates to when his son had to stay in hospital for up to a week after he was born, and what with COVID restrictions and everything being in place, he could only see him for 2 hours, hence the kind of lyric. So the lyric therefore has kind of several meanings, is taking on a bit of a kind of cyclical nature, which then in itself is kind of, it's mentioned, I suppose, in the song itself with the lyric, "When everything is over, it begins where it ends." And I thought it was a kind of really standout track for me, and one that I really enjoyed. And again, back to what we're saying, it had that female and male vocals coupled together, which worked really well.
I like the track before that, the Overlook. I think it's got some of my favourite kind of vocal lines. They're quite soaring, a bit warbling at times, and then there's a bit more savagery and bite to the vocals in the choruses. And the lyric that goes, "Life is a thorn in the side of growth, spite is a knife in the spine of progress." I just find that to be really powerful. And then amongst these kind of angular electronic sounding instrumentals, like I'm not quite sure if the guitars or electronic synths or whatever, but they're either way they're pretty cool. And the drums are really massive on that song as well. Like the drums are really good all across the album as well, they really stand out.
Yeah, I'd agree. What was your thoughts on That There's Fighting Talk, which again is a pretty amazing title for a song?
It's a pretty amazing song title. It's one of the weirdest songs. It's got these sort of chanted vocals that sort of mimic the stab of the instrumentals. It's quite erratic, but also ends up being quite catchy in a lot of places. I do think it's cool, but it's not. Yeah, it's not my favourite track on the album, but I do enjoy it.
See, I can see what you mean, because so I wrote my notes and then I found that article that we were kind of talking about just there, and I've written it opens with this kind of unnerving, unsettling staccato type electronic flourishes which creates a real sense of unease. And then I went back and read that article, or discovered that article, and according to that article it's about the lead singer's past and his own emotional instability or irritability at times, and times where he's been victim to kind of violence or perpetrated violence himself. And knowing that now, that there's kind of parts in the song that for me kind of take on a bit of a new meaning. So there's kind of whispered lyrics at around the kind of 2 minute 30-second mark, which remind me of the idea of these kind of like irrational thoughts that sometimes kind of plague our minds when we're at our most vulnerable, and they kind of put me in mind of like having the devil and the angel on your shoulders and them kind of whispering into your ear. So I thought that was quite cool, actually.
Yeah, I think, and there's just lots of really interesting things all over the album. I've mentioned in a couple of different songs that there's like the odd Biffy Clyro vibe here and there, just the kind of more the heavier, maybe not quite the sort of radio rock side of Biffy, the kind of heavier, more oddly timed kind of stuff. But
you like fucking with time signatures.
Yeah, and then some of the melodies and the vocals as well just sound a bit like Biffy. But the last track, I Pray to Liars, is one of the ones where I've kind of picked out a little bit of a sort of Biffy-esque melody, but it's also one of my favourite tracks, and it's got the screams of monetize the misery, for goodness sake, this is goodness grace, which is just one of the best lines on the album. Heavy as fuck, really melodic. There's the bit that goes, I pray to liars who bleed me dry, and that part I think reminds me a little bit of the Bats album that we covered like way back, like episode 4 I think it was. Just some of the erratic kind of heaviness of that sort of album. Yeah, there was stuff on here that reminded me of that, which is only a good thing.
Yeah, again, kind of in reading that article, so apparently this song is about the music industry and the lead singer's opinion that they want artists to be maimed, riddled with addiction, suffering and damaged in some way, because that's what sells. Like the idea of the kind of tortured artist. So a bit like, I suppose, the sentiment or the idea behind the Lost Tapes of the 27 Club, the AI album that we covered previously.
Yeah.
So this idea, this song in this album is kind of set to kind of challenge this view and kind of wishes to champion the idea that the album is to act as kind of role model for future generations and allow them to realise that it's okay to take risks, make mistakes and grow because of it. So I thought that was a pretty cool message to kind of chuck in there.
Yeah, like the impression that I got from the name of the song and how heavy it was, and like that, the bit that says I pray to liars who'd bleed me dry, it just made me think of like just religion and the sort of
pomposity
if you think about like whenever you visit a city, the richest parts of the city are always the church, and it's like that thing about being praying to liars who bleed me dry just made me think of that kind of they take everything from you.
The hypocrisy of it all.
Yeah, so that was kind of without delving into it all, that was kind of the immediate take I got from it, which I really liked. But so
yeah, man.
So overall, what have you given this then?
I've given it a 7 or 8 out of 10.
I've gone for an 8 out of 10. Like I said, I'm not sure I love it quite as much as Caprice on Shantae, but I still think it's a really good album and a worthy follow-up to that album.
Cool, man.
Okay, so that was Galore by the St. Pierre Snake Invasion.
Before we move on, do you know where their name comes from? Have you looked into that?
I did. Not for this. I totally forgot about that. I just was taking their name for granted at this point. But I do remember looking it up back in the day, but I don't really remember.
So their name comes from an incident which occurred in 1902, whereupon Mount Pelée on the island of Saint Pierre in Martinique erupted, so somewhere in the West Indies, causing the death of approximately 30,000 people on the island and driving wildlife into the local towns below, most notably an army of snakes. I think in the article that I read it said like man-eating snakes, and I'm like, is there? Like, I suppose they do
like
sometimes.
Anacondas, like giant anacondas.
Yeah, pretty interesting. I don't know anything. I just read that. I don't know what happened afterwards.
I remember, I do remember reading that way back, and then I was like, it just reminds me of there's an episode of The Simpsons where there's like a day in Springfield where they go around like clubbing snakes. Yeah. And it's all because like Jeremiah Springfield back in the day like rescued the town from like an army of snakes by like clubbing them. So they all had like, it's like these sort of semi-amateur professional bowlers. They've all got their like nice bowling ball and everything, but this was like they're like clubbing stick like for the snakes, and it just reminds me of that. Which is probably loosely based on that.
Probably.
That story, the St. Pierre Snake Invasion. So, I remember that finding that quite funny at the time when I learned that. So, yeah, it was a great name. Okay, that's us on to the last album then. So this is The Third Side of the Coin, which is the second album from Edinburgh-based artist Inkfields, also known as Samuel James Griffiths. And this was recorded in the legendary Abbey Road Studios, and it was released on the 28th of April 2023, so just a few days ago. So we were sent this by Ian Dawson at Ravechild, and Ravechild curate a regularly updated new Scottish music playlist. They also have a Scottish music blog and a new Scottish music podcast with Snack Magazine called Everybody Wants to Play the Hits. They're also a music PR service, so they're kind of they're doing their bit to promote Scottish music. So I'm really glad that Ian sent this over to us because I've really been enjoying it. I think there's a sort of intricacy to it that we've seen from the likes of O'Shin or John Mickey, like two totally different artists, but I think they're all adept at combining all these lots of different like musical elements into a really engaging package. So the opening track, the title track for the album, The Third Side of the Coin, it combines a kicking drum beat with muted guitar picking, the odd sort of shoegazy effect and some almost western sounding riffs. The vocals are found to be very poppy. I've said like almost like Michael Bublé or Robbie Williams, like poppy. Maybe it's a little bit too far, but
I never got that. I got El Camino. Well, what I've written here is El Camino era Black Keys. That's what I thought.
But that's where my head went to with that. This sort of like sweet kind of crooning kind of vocal, and it's not something that I'm normally into, but it works pretty well here with everything that surrounds it, and it reminded me a little bit of the West Lothian band Dictator, who I saw at Stag and Dagger a couple of years ago, actually, at Sneaky Pete's, and their singer had a similar kind of style, like really poppy, but really like a really good singer. And I think that sort of muted guitar picking is a bit of a theme across the album. That sort of style. The second track, Moroccan Blue, has got these kind of chugging muted guitars, a sort of sparkly ethereal guitar lick, and here I really love the vocals. They're quite moody, but they're still poppy, and they just work along with everything else. You've got female backing vocals that come in as well later on. They're really wonderful, and there's also a super like hard edged like glam rock almost guitar riff that gets thrown into the mix a couple of times, which I really love.
Yeah, so when I was kind of reading about the album, I think it was in one of his Instagram posts about the album. He was trying to recreate I don't know. He's always had an affinity with the sea, so he was trying to recreate that in the album, and I think you can see that reflected in a lot of these songs. As you mentioned, those kind of ethereal type kind of soundscapes, that there is a lot of that kind of peppered throughout the course of the album. A lot of kind of intricacies and depth and texture, which works really well. It kind of is that kind of juxtaposition to that kind of swaggering kind of, I think it's kind of soft kind of bluesy guitar riffs for the most part. Yeah, which I quite enjoyed.
Yeah, there's a lot of songs I've picked out here as being highlights on the album. I really like Pomposity. It's got really like the lead guitar line on that's really great. The drums, especially on that song, there's a wee bit of reverb to the drums, and it just gives them this really satisfying like clap. Really poppy vocals, and then the last. It's this song where it takes like a crazy turn in the last 40 seconds and turns into this like buzzing, grinding, gothic, industrial sort of beast, and it's just like comes out of absolutely nowhere, but it's my favourite moment on the album. It just turns into this weird gothic thing. It's good. I think track 7, Smile for the Camera, another really great song, really awesome hard rock guitar riff, and it's just really unexpected, but it works. It's got these laid back vocals and drums, and I can't quite make out what the lyrics are through the section, but the melody is great, and then it's got this smile, this bit where he sings "Smile for the Camera" at the end of a few different lines, and always just stands out for me. And round about the 2-minute 15 mark, there's this really cool squealing bending guitar as well. That's definitely one of the best songs, and it kind of annoys me that I can't quite pick out what those lyrics are, because it's a really sort of sing along bit, and I just can't quite figure out what the lyrics are.
Yeah, I'm not sure, man. I mean, I like the lyrics. I know that you said that they're quite poppy. I wouldn't necessarily agree. That there was one song where I was Fate of Luck, the spoken word lyrics just wasn't doing it for me at all. I did find them a bit cringy. However, as soon as he started singing again, I was right back on board. That would have been my only criticism of that song, I think.
See, I really like the spoken word parts. It's the bit where
spoken word's normally up my street, but I just didn't.
I'm surprised. It's the bit where he's like, he goes, and I say, hey, what are you doing tonight? Are you making the right choice? Is there a right choice? Or are we simply playing the lottery of life, waiting in the long and frustrating queue of uncertainty? And that's just a short part of it, but I loved that bit.
What did you think of the album as a whole then? It's quite a short album, isn't it? Like it's
like 24 minutes or something, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that. Just under half an hour.
26.5 minutes, something round about. So yeah, it is really short, but I think that's in its favour because it does a few things. Those sort of muted guitars, the poppy vocals, I think it does those things on a lot of the tracks. It mixes things up a lot, but it also has those kind of elements that are peppered throughout all of the tracks. So I think the fact that it's short stops that from getting samey,
overused. And
overused. So I think it's the fact that it's fairly short works in its favour. So yeah, I think overall I really liked it. And,
I liked it as well. I know that I kind of mentioned the idea of the sea, or the concept of the sea. I think if you look at the album art, it kind of is quite reminiscent of the sea, and I think it's interesting to say, or it's interesting to mention rather, that each of the tracks are kind of coupled with a specific piece of artwork. To outline certain species of animals and plants that are endangered to Scotland, and kind of raising awareness of some unusual species that some people might not be aware of. So you've got like Atlantic salmon, can't remember them all, but yeah, there's one for all. But even as I said, plants as well, plants that I'd certainly never heard of, like kind of some alpine bush and stuff like that. So that was quite cool. I think the album itself sounds amazing. So it was recorded and produced at home, but mixed at the iconic Abbey Road. And again, kind of backtracking a wee bit, but I mentioned this idea of the sea, or the concept of the sea, and I do think that it's quite an easy listen, and that's not to say that it's throwaway in any respect, but I do feel as if it does kind of wash over you, if that makes sense. But there's still plenty of interesting wee hooks and grooves to kind of draw you in, which you kind of mentioned there, Snedds.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's easy listening, but at the same time, if you listen closely, there are lots of little bits here and there to pick out and enjoy. So yeah, a good album. What have you given it?
I've given it an 8.
Yeah, that's what I've given it as well. Yeah, solid 8 out of 10.
I was going to ask you, did you see him in Edinburgh? Because I'm pretty sure he's playing Sneaky Pete's. Like, I know that he's touring in Germany, or is due to tour in Germany pretty soon. Or maybe he has already, but I'm pretty sure he was playing Sneaky Pete's a few days ago.
I think he was on the
part of the Stag and
Dagger,
like
Friday
stuff.
Night or Thursday or Friday night. It wasn't part of Stag and Dagger though, because if it had been, I would have
went.
Probably would have went, but I didn't. Yeah, I didn't have the chance to go, but I think that would have been quite a good gig.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if he incorporates his artwork into his stage show. You know what I mean? If there's some kind of, if he kind of plays coupled with some interesting visuals.
Yeah, or even like sells some of the artwork as merch, or like prints and stuff like that. That'd be quite cool.
Aye.
Nice. So that was Third Side of the Coin by Inkfields.
And I live on the third side of the coin.
Ist einfach so.
And I said, hey, what are you doing tonight? Are you making the right choice? I hear your words, I don't see your action. You put on a show, smile for the camera.
Okay, there we go. That's the last album. We've blasted through all of that stuff. So that's another episode of the Scratchcast pumped into your lugs. Remember to send us thoughts on the music we've covered, and if you do like any of the bands or artists we've talked about, then make sure you send them some love. If you want to support our show, then you can subscribe to the Scratchcast wherever you get your podcasts, and also on YouTube if you want to see our actual faces. Grant just had some kind of twitching fit
I had
there.
a mini stroke there, I think.
So if you want to see that kind of action, then head over to YouTube. Yeah, but wherever you find us, please leave a nice review and give us a wee share. It'll help spread the good word. If you want to go above and beyond, then you can buy Grant and myself a coffee at buymeacoffee.com. The link is in the episode description. If you'd like your music to be featured on the podcast, then send your submissions to theheadscratcher@outlook.com or message us directly on Facebook and Instagram at theheadscratcher or on Twitter at scratcherhead. Don't forget, you can also head over to the Head Scratcher to find pop culture reviews, recommendations, alternative music playlists, interviews, and of course all the previous episodes of the podcast. Our alternative playlist for April and March is coming soon, and that'll be filled with loads of cool tunes like Olympus by Dawn by Tanith, The Clutch by Palehound, FaceTime by Billy Woods, Kenny Segal and Samuel T. Herring, Snowfall by Bems, Mother of All Bastards by They Watch Us from the Moon, and I've said Post-Punk Experiment number 3 by the Wife Guys. I read it in here as well, so I was obviously really excited by that song. But anyway, as always, there are hours and hours of other cool shit in there, so make sure you check it out. So finally, if you made it this far, all that's left to say is thanks for listening, and as always, please tell your friends, your colleagues, your parents and your pets. We'll catch you on the next episode. Bye.
I should probably say bye as well, shouldn't we? Cheerio.
Yeah.
It's only polite.
It's only polite. Just remaining silent is the equivalent of just being like, go fuck yourselves. Go fuck yourselves.
Cheerio.
It's not finished. It's finished.